She thought it was just a fake wedding. Months later, something shocking happened. When a woman agrees to marry a successful businessman for convenience, she thinks it's a simple arrangement. No emotions, no complications. But as the days pass, she begins to see the real man behind the business facade, and a small spark of doubt begins to grow. Then, the unthinkable happens. He confesses that the wedding wasn't fake for him. He's been in love with her this whole time. But just when she starts to question her own heart, a shocking truth shatters everything. His love wasn't the only secret he's been hiding. What happens when the lines between business and romance blur? Can she trust him after all the lies? Or will his hidden past destroy everything they've built? Is it too late for love? Or will the truth bring them closer than ever? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Tanya Lawson had always been the type of woman who kept things simple, straightforward and focused. At 29, she had her life together in a way that most people only dreamt of. A successful career in marketing, an apartment with a view of the city skyline, and a circle of close friends who appreciated her no-nonsense attitude. Love? That wasn't part of the plan. Not after her last relationship, which had left her feeling hollow. She wasn't interested in opening her heart again, especially not to someone like Derek Miles. She first met Derek at a family dinner a few months ago. He was a tall, handsome man in his early 40s, with dark hair and an air of quiet confidence. His smile was warm, but there was something about his eyes, something that made Tanya uneasy. Perhaps it was his effortless charm, or perhaps it was the way people looked at him, as if he were more than just a businessman. To Tanya, he was nothing more than the son of a family friend, someone who had always been just a bit out of reach. That night, over glasses of wine and awkward pleasantries, Derek made an unexpected proposal. "Tanya," he had said, leaning in slightly, his voice lowering with a hint of seriousness. "I need your help." She had raised an eyebrow. "Help with what?" "Marriage." Derek continued, not missing a beat. "I know this may sound strange, but my family is putting pressure on me to marry. There's a clause in my father's will that requires me to be married to inherit the family business. You wouldn't have to do much, just a fake wedding, a simple contract." Tanya had nearly choked on her wine. Fake marriage? The audacity. But when he explained that it would only be for business reasons, with no romantic involvement, Tanya's pragmatism took over. She had always been the logical one. She could do this, help him, and in return, she'd be compensated well enough to take care of some personal debts. Her mother had urged her to do it, too, seeing it as an opportunity to help Derek and his family while easing Tanya's financial burden. Her mother had a way of getting what she wanted, and in this case, it was hard for Tanya to refuse. The terms were simple. Tanya would sign the marriage contract, attend a small ceremony, and then return to her life as usual. There would be no emotional attachment, no entanglements, just business. The deal was clear. Derek had reassured her time and time again that he wasn't interested in a real marriage. It was all about the inheritance. So Tanya agreed. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur of preparation, lawyers, paperwork, and finalizing the details. Tanya tried to convince herself that it was just a means to an end. No feelings, no expectations. But as the wedding day approached, she couldn't help but feel a strange weight in her chest. Was it guilt? Or something else? On the day of the ceremony, Tanya found herself standing in front of a mirror, adjusting her simple yet elegant dress. It was modest, just like she had planned. No frills, no extravagance. Derek's family wanted a low-key event, and that suited her just fine. The small chapel was peaceful, the kind of place where the air seemed to hum with a quiet reverence. Derek stood at the altar, his expression calm, though Tanya noticed the subtle way he looked at her, a glimmer of something she couldn't quite place. His tailored suit fit him perfectly, and he looked every bit the part of the successful businessman he was. Their vows were short and formal. No promises of love or passion, just a commitment to respect the terms of their arrangement. Tanya barely registered the words as they were spoken. All she could think of was how surreal the entire situation felt. Was this really happening? The ceremony was over before she had time to process it, and before she knew it, they were signing the papers, officially husband and wife in name only. Tanya glanced at Derek briefly, wondering if he felt as odd about this as she did. But he only smiled, his eyes warm, and she felt a flutter in her chest, a flutter she quickly ignored. Later that evening, they attended a small family gathering. It was the first time Tanya had seen Derek truly interact with his family. He was kind, thoughtful, and well respected by those around him. He seemed to move through the evening effortlessly, always knowing what to say, how to make people feel comfortable. Tanya couldn't help but feel a small pang of admiration. He was everything her ex had never been, confident, strong, and capable. But that admiration quickly turned to confusion as Derek approached her near the end of the evening. "We're married now," he said, his voice soft. "I don't want to rush things, but I'd like us to get to know each other better, outside of this arrangement." Tanya froze. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. "I thought we agreed," she said, keeping her voice steady, though her heart was pounding in her chest. "No emotions, no strings attached." Derek's smile faltered, just for a moment, but then he recovered, his expression unreadable. "I know, but sometimes things change." Tanya's thoughts were racing. She wasn't sure what he meant. Maybe it was just the pressure of the wedding getting to him, or maybe he was just trying to be polite. Either way, she wasn't prepared to deal with whatever he was implying. "Good night, Derek," she said, turning away quickly. She couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The deal was supposed to be simple, yet somehow it already felt complicated. As Tanya lay in bed later that night, her mind wouldn't let her rest. Derek's words echoed in her head. Sometimes things change. She closed her eyes, willing herself to forget about it. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, something she couldn't quite grasp yet. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she would put it out of her mind and focus on what really mattered, getting back to her life. But a part of her couldn't help but wonder if this fake marriage would ever remain as simple as she had hoped. The wedding had ended, but something was stirring inside her, something that wasn't supposed to be there. The days that followed the wedding were a strange mix of routine and unpredictability. Tanya threw herself into work, focusing on her projects with a laser-like determination. After all, she told herself, this was just another task to complete. Married on paper, but her heart was still firmly locked away. Derek had respected her boundaries, maintaining a professional distance and keeping their interactions strictly about the business arrangements. But something about the whole situation felt off. Despite the clear-cut terms of their marriage, Tanya began to notice small things that made her question whether Derek was truly as detached as he claimed to be. The way he looked at her sometimes, just for a second too long, with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. The way his voice softened when he spoke to her, as if there was more behind the words than the formalities of their agreement. These small moments left Tanya unsettled, but she brushed them aside, telling herself that she was reading too much into things. He was just being polite, she reasoned, just being a decent person. She would have preferred it if he weren't so decent. Derek had been kind, almost unnervingly so. He'd checked in with her every few days to make sure she was settling into the marriage, though they were living separately. And each time, he seemed genuinely concerned. There was no trace of the coldness she'd expected from a man who only needed a wife for appearances. When Tanya brought up her work stress, Derek would listen intently, offering support without overstepping any boundaries. He never asked for anything in return, and that made her even more uncomfortable. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate his thoughtfulness. It was just unexpected. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, after a long meeting with clients, Tanya received a message from Derek asking if she would join him for a casual dinner. He mentioned a new restaurant in town that he thought she might like. At first, Tanya hesitated. It wasn't part of their arrangement. But then again, it wasn't exactly a breach of their deal either. They were married after all, and spending time together wouldn't mean anything. She agreed, figuring it would be a simple evening with no emotional stakes. Just two people trying to maintain appearances. When she arrived at the restaurant, a sleek, upscale spot downtown, Derek was already seated at a quiet corner table. As Tanya approached, he stood to greet her with that same warm smile he always wore, his dark eyes meeting hers with an expression that seemed to hold more than just politeness. Tanya tried to ignore the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "Thank you for coming," he said as she sat down. "I thought we could unwind for a bit. You've been working hard." She nodded, offering a small smile. "It's no problem. I could use a break." The evening unfolded like many others. They ate, exchanged casual stories about their work, and laughed lightly. But there was an underlying tension, a quiet energy in the air between them that Tanya couldn't quite explain. She noticed how Derek's gaze seemed to linger on her from time to time, the way his voice softened when he spoke her name. She told herself that it was just his personality. He was a genuinely caring person. Yet every time their eyes met, a small, unwanted spark of something unfamiliar flickered in her chest. By the end of the evening, Tanya had almost convinced herself that she had imagined it all, that there was no underlying meaning behind Derek's attention, no hidden agenda. But as she prepared to leave, Derek did something that caught her completely off guard. He reached across the table, gently placing his hand on hers. "Tanya," he said quietly, his voice low, almost uncertain. "I know this arrangement isn't ideal, and I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. But I just want you to know that, well, I'm not doing this just because of the business deal. It means more to me. I care about you." Tanya froze. Her pulse quickened, and for a moment everything seemed to stop. She pulled her hand away quickly, the warmth of his touch lingering on her skin. "Derek," she said, her voice firm, though her insides were twisting. "We agreed. No emotions. This is just business." He didn't pull his hand back immediately. Instead, he looked at her with those earnest eyes, the same look he had when they first met. It was a look that made her heart ache in a way she wasn't ready to acknowledge. "I know," he replied softly, his voice tinged with regret. "But I can't help how I feel. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I just thought you should know." Tanya's thoughts raced. She wasn't sure what to say. Her mouth was dry and her heart was beating erratically. Derek wasn't supposed to feel this way. The deal had been so simple, so clear-cut. He had no right to complicate things. And yet here he was, confessing his feelings, leaving her to deal with emotions she had no interest in confronting. She started, but the words caught in her throat. She couldn't lie to him, but she couldn't afford to let herself believe what he was saying either. This was a business agreement. Nothing more. "I need to go," she said abruptly, standing up. Derek nodded, standing as well. He didn't try to stop her, but his expression was a mixture of sadness and understanding. "Take care of yourself, Tanya," he said quietly. As Tanya left the restaurant, the rain had stopped, but the weight of the conversation lingered. She couldn't escape the growing unease that had settled in her chest. Derek's words echoed in her mind. "I care about you." But how could she let herself care about him? Later that night, Tanya lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Derek's confession replayed in her mind, over and over again. She had known that entering this arrangement was risky, but she never expected to feel this way. He wasn't supposed to matter to her. This was just a business deal. But now, Tanya wasn't so sure. Could she keep her heart locked away when Derek's was wide open? And if she didn't, what would that mean for them both? The following days passed in a blur of confusion and unanswered questions. Tanya tried to bury herself in work, focusing on the tasks that always kept her grounded. Yet, no matter how hard she tried to keep her mind busy, it kept wandering back to the dinner with Derek. The way his words had hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truth. She couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them, something that hadn't existed before, but now was undeniably present. Her routine was the same. Wake up early, grab coffee, head to the office. But now, each time she saw Derek's name pop up on her phone, her heart would skip a beat, and she'd feel a strange flutter of anticipation. She hated it. She hated that she was starting to care, even a little bit. It was supposed to be simple. They had an agreement, no emotions, just a business arrangement. But Derek's gentle persistence was beginning to crack her defenses. He wasn't the type of man who backed down easily. He was smart, charismatic, and unexpectedly sincere. Every time he reached out to her, whether it was a simple text, a phone call, or one of their infrequent meetings, he managed to remind her that he cared. He cared about her in a way she hadn't expected, and worse, in a way that was starting to feel more real than she wanted to admit. On a particularly slow afternoon, Tanya found herself sitting at her desk, absently staring out the window. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. Derek had sent her a message. "Can we talk?" Tanya sighed, leaning back in her chair. She knew she couldn't avoid him forever. The truth was, avoiding him made everything worse. He'd been persistent, but she hadn't been completely fair to him either. She had been shutting him out, not giving him a chance to explain himself. Against her better judgment, she typed a quick reply. "Sure, when?" His response was quick. "How about dinner tonight? Just us. No rush, just a conversation." Tanya hesitated for a moment. Was this another one of his attempts to break through the wall she'd built? Part of her wanted to ignore it, but another part, the part she had been trying to suppress, was curious, even eager to hear what he had to say. She couldn't help herself. Derek had a way of drawing her in, making her feel like everything would be okay. She agreed. The evening arrived quickly, and Tanya found herself standing outside a small, cozy restaurant, the kind that wasn't flashy but felt warm and inviting. She'd been to this place before, with friends, laughing over glasses of wine and sharing stories of their hectic lives. It felt different this time. The weight of the conversation that was about to unfold pressed on her chest, and for the first time in a while, she felt nervous. As she entered, she spotted Derek almost immediately. He was sitting at a corner table, just as he had the last time, looking calm and composed as always. But there was something different in his eyes tonight, something more intense, more serious. Tanya's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. "Hey," she greeted him, trying to keep her tone light. "Hey, Tanya," he said, standing up to pull out her chair. "Thanks for coming." She sat down, grateful for the small gesture, but also aware of how much it was starting to matter. Derek had a way of making her feel both at ease and on edge, all at once. They ordered their meals, and for a while they made small talk, discussing work, life, and the usual pleasantries. But Tanya could tell that Derek was holding something back. His eyes kept flicking to hers, his words carefully chosen. He was waiting for the right moment, and she knew it was coming. Eventually, after they had finished their entrees, Derek set his fork down and looked at her, his expression serious. "Tanya," he began, his voice quieter than usual. "I've been thinking about our arrangement, about what I said the other night." Tanya's stomach tightened. She had known this conversation was coming, but hearing him speak about it so directly made her feel exposed. "Derek, we agreed. This is just business. We don't need to talk about it." He shook his head, his gaze not leaving hers. "I don't think you understand. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just trying to be honest with you." Tanya swallowed hard. "Honest?" "I never wanted this to be just a contract." He continued, his voice soft but steady. "I'm not saying I expected you to feel the same way, but I do want you to know how I feel. And I care about you, Tanya. I really do." Tanya's breath caught in her throat. Her heart was racing now, faster than she could keep up with. She wanted to respond, wanted to tell him how she felt. But the words wouldn't come. She couldn't do this. She couldn't let herself feel this way. "Please," Derek added, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm not asking you to love me back. Not yet. But I need you to know that I'm here. If you ever want to talk, if you ever need someone—" Tanya interrupted him, her own emotions threatening to spill over. "I'm not ready for this, Derek. I can't just—" "I know," he said quickly, cutting her off. "I'm not rushing you. I just needed you to hear it." There was a pause, a moment of silence that stretched between them. Tanya looked down at her hands, her mind racing. Derek's confession had shattered the wall she'd built, and she didn't know how to fix it. She had promised herself she wouldn't fall for him. But now, every part of her was screaming that it was already too late. The waiter arrived to clear their plates, but neither of them spoke. Derek seemed content to let the silence linger, his expression thoughtful. Tanya, on the other hand, felt as though she was standing on the edge of something she wasn't ready to face. As the evening ended and they walked out into the crisp night air, Derek's words echoed in her mind. "I care about you. But how could she let herself care about him?" Tanya lay in bed later that night, staring up at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over. Derek's confession had cracked her carefully constructed resolve, but she wasn't ready to admit that to herself yet. She couldn't afford to let him in. Not now, not after everything she had been through. Yet, with every passing hour, the line between business and emotion seemed to blur even more. And the truth was, she wasn't sure if she could stop it from happening. The next few days felt like a haze to Tanya, as if her life had shifted just slightly off course without her consent. Derek's words lingered in her mind. "I care about you." Every time she tried to push them away, they returned with more weight, more meaning. She had never planned to feel anything for him, yet somehow, in the span of just a few months, he had become an inescapable part of her life. But that didn't change the fact that they had a deal. She had entered this marriage with clear intentions, no love, no entanglements, just a simple arrangement. The more she thought about it, the more tangled the web seemed to become. Tanya did her best to maintain distance. She focused on work, buried herself in her projects, and kept all communication with Derek strictly professional. But it was harder than she expected. Every time he checked in, every time they exchanged messages, her resolve wavered. Derek wasn't pushing her, he wasn't demanding anything, but his care, his kindness, left her questioning her own choices. It was Friday afternoon when she received another message from him. "I know it's been a hectic week, but I'd really like to talk. When you have time." Tanya stared at the message for a long moment. She had promised herself she wouldn't let this get complicated. But then again, they had already crossed that line. She owed it to Derek to at least be honest with him, even if that honesty meant confronting feelings she wasn't ready to face. She agreed to meet him, but this time she wouldn't let herself get too close. The dinner had been one thing, an emotional slip. This time, she'd maintain control. They met at a quiet coffee shop downtown, a place where neither of them were likely to run into anyone they knew. As Tanya walked in, she spotted Derek at a corner table, already waiting. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes scanned the room, and when they met hers, she saw that familiar look, a quiet anticipation, but also an undeniable vulnerability. "Hey," Tanya greeted him as she approached the table, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hey," Derek replied, standing up to pull out her chair. "Thanks for coming." She sat down, and for a moment they both just stared at each other in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Tanya fidgeted with her cup of coffee, not knowing how to begin. Derek broke the silence first. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable, Tanya. I really don't." His voice was soft, almost apologetic. "But I need to say this because it's been weighing on me." Tanya took a deep breath, trying to prepare herself for what he might say. "What is it?" "I know we agreed this would just be a business arrangement, and I respect that, but I can't pretend anymore." Derek's voice trembled just slightly. "I've fallen for you, Tanya, and I can't keep going like this, pretending it's nothing." Tanya's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to say something, anything to shut him down, but the words didn't come. Instead, she just sat there, staring at him, her emotions caught between anger, confusion, and something she couldn't quite name. "I didn't want to make this harder for you," Derek continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "But I've realized that I can't hide how I feel. You've become so much more to me than just a business partner. I care about you, and I know it's complicated. I don't expect anything from you, not now, not ever. But I had to be honest with you." Tanya was silent for a long moment, trying to process what he had said. She felt a knot form in her chest. She had been running from this exact moment for weeks. But now it was here, and she couldn't ignore it any longer. He wasn't asking for anything. He was simply sharing his truth. But in doing so, he had set her world spinning. "I don't know what to say," Tanya admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "This isn't how I thought this would go. I thought this was just business, no emotions." "I know," Derek said softly. "I thought the same thing at first. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being just that. And I couldn't pretend anymore." Tanya's heart ached. Derek wasn't asking her to love him back, but the truth was she didn't know what she felt anymore. She had never allowed herself to consider that love could bloom from something so calculated, so deliberate. But here it was, undeniable and real, standing right in front of her. "I never expected to care about you," Tanya murmured, more to herself than to Derek. "I never planned for any of this to happen." "I understand," Derek said, his voice gentle, full of understanding. "I didn't expect it either. But I'm here, Tanya. I'm not going anywhere." Tanya stared down at the table, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. She felt trapped, caught between two worlds, the world she had carefully constructed for herself, where everything was about control and self-reliance, and this world that Derek was offering, one where vulnerability and connection were at the center. She didn't know what she wanted. She didn't know what was right. "I need time," Tanya said finally, lifting her eyes to meet his. "I can't give you anything right now, Derek. I need time to figure this out." Derek nodded, his expression softening. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be here." The weight of the moment hung between them as they sat in silence, the hum of the coffee shop surrounding them. Tanya wasn't sure what she was supposed to do with this feeling inside her. She had spent so long shutting out love, convincing herself that it wasn't something she needed. But Derek's honesty, his openness, made her wonder if she had been wrong all along. Could she allow herself to feel this way? Could she take the risk? As Tanya left the coffee shop that evening, the cool air hit her face, but it didn't seem to shake the storm brewing inside her. Derek's words played on repeat in her mind. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in a long while, Tanya felt as if she was standing at the edge of something both terrifying and beautiful. She wasn't sure what her heart wanted, or what her mind could handle. But one thing was certain. This marriage, this business arrangement, was never going to stay as simple as she had hoped. The days following her conversation with Derek felt like a whirlwind, with Tanya doing everything she could to avoid confronting the reality of her emotions. She threw herself into her work with more intensity than ever, hoping that the busyness would keep her mind off what had happened. Derek's confession still echoed in her mind, each word pressing deeper into her thoughts. She couldn't deny that there had been something in his eyes, something raw and vulnerable that had made her heart ache. But how could she let herself feel that way? How could she let herself be so vulnerable when she had spent so long building walls to protect herself? Tanya had always been the strong one, the one who didn't rely on anyone, the one who had learned the hard way not to trust easily. She had promised herself that love wouldn't find her again, not after everything she had been through. But Derek, with his quiet strength and genuine kindness, had found a way past the barriers she'd put up. And now, she wasn't sure how to move forward. It wasn't that she didn't care about him. She did. In fact, she had come to care about him more than she was willing to admit. But letting her heart open to him felt like the ultimate risk. What if he disappointed her, like so many others had in the past? What if she let herself believe in something real, only to have it crumble before her eyes? Tanya's internal conflict was a constant weight, pulling at her every time she saw Derek's name pop up on her phone or when they crossed paths at work. Their interactions had remained polite, but the distance between them had grown, and Tanya couldn't tell if it was the space she had put between them or if Derek had pulled away, too. One Thursday afternoon, Tanya found herself in the middle of a long meeting at work. She was barely paying attention, her mind drifting to Derek and the conversation they had shared. She couldn't escape the nagging thought that she was running from something that was already pulling her in. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She needed to see him again. She needed to face whatever this was between them. She excused herself from the meeting early, making an excuse about needing to attend to something urgent. Her heart raced as she made her way out of the office, her decision feeling both impulsive and inevitable. She wasn't sure what she was going to say to Derek, but she knew she couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. Tanya arrived at Derek's apartment just before sunset, the golden light filtering through the trees lining the street. She took a deep breath before pressing the doorbell, suddenly feeling the weight of the moment. When the door opened, Derek stood in front of her, looking surprised but not at all unwelcoming. "Tanya," he said softly, his voice a mixture of curiosity and hope. "What's going on?" I need to talk to you," she said, her voice shaky despite her best efforts to sound confident. "I've been thinking about what you said the other night, and I'm not sure what I want anymore." Derek stepped back, opening the door wider to let her in. "Of course," he said, gesturing for her to sit down. I'm glad you came. I know it's been a lot, and I don't want to push you, but I just need you to know I'm here whenever you're ready." Tanya sat down on the couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked around the room, taking in the warmth of the space, the pictures of Derek's family on the walls, and the subtle signs of his personality. Small details that made the apartment feel lived in. Real. It wasn't what she had expected. Derek, for all his business success and professionalism, had a softer side. He was more than just the man who had proposed a fake marriage. He was someone with hopes, dreams, and, as it turned out, a heart that had already begun to care for her in a way she hadn't anticipated. "I'm scared, Derek," Tanya admitted, her voice trembling. "I'm scared of what this means. I'm scared of falling for you, because what if this doesn't work out? What if we get hurt? I can't go through that again." Derek sat beside her, close but not too close. His eyes softened with understanding, and he placed his hand on hers, a simple gesture that sent a wave of warmth through her. "Tanya, I get it. I'm scared too," he said quietly. "I'm scared that you'll push me away because of the way I feel about you. I'm scared of what happens if this doesn't work, but I can't ignore how much you mean to me. I don't want to pressure you into anything. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm willing to wait. I'll wait for you, no matter how long it takes." Tanya's breath caught in her throat as she felt the depth of his sincerity. In that moment, she realized that she wasn't just running from him. She was running from herself, from the feelings she had buried deep inside, afraid to admit that she was capable of loving again. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, feeling the weight of her confession. "I've spent so much time convincing myself that I didn't need anyone, that I didn't need love. But now I don't know if I can keep pretending that this isn't real." Derek's hand gently squeezed hers. "You don't have to pretend. You don't have to have all the answers right now. I'm not asking for anything except for you to be honest with yourself." Tanya closed her eyes, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions inside her. For the first time in years, she felt the walls around her heart beginning to crumble. Maybe it was time to stop pretending. Maybe it was time to take a chance. She looked at Derek, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't want to be scared anymore. I don't want to run from this." Derek smiled, a warm, relieved smile, and leaned in slightly. "Then don't. Take my hand, Tanya. I'm here, and I'll always be here." For the first time in a long while, Tanya felt like she could breathe. The fear that had held her back for so long was starting to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of hope. Derek wasn't asking her for perfection. He wasn't asking for her to have all the answers. He was simply asking her to take a chance. And for the first time, she was ready to do just that. As she sat beside him, hand in hand, Tanya realized that maybe this wasn't just a business arrangement after all. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something more. The days following Tanya's conversation with Derek felt different. Lighter, in a way. The weight she had carried for so long, this constant fear of opening herself up to someone, seemed to dissipate bit by bit, though it still lingered in the back of her mind. Derek hadn't pushed her, hadn't rushed her. He respected her space, but his quiet presence was comforting, and his understanding was something Tanya hadn't realized she'd been longing for. She found herself thinking about him more, and not just about the business arrangement they'd made, but about him as a person, his kindness, his gentle persistence, and the way he was always so careful not to overstep. She had never had anyone like that in her life, not someone who truly respected her boundaries while also showing that they cared in subtle, meaningful ways. Derek had never pressured her, never tried to force an emotional connection, and that, more than anything, had started to break down the walls she had spent years constructing. It was Thursday when Derek called her again. asking if she wanted to grab dinner. She had been thinking about him all day, and when she saw his name on her phone, her heart did a little flip. She was still nervous, uncertain about what it meant to let herself care, but this time she said yes without hesitation. They met at a small bistro that had become one of Derek's favorite spots. It was cozy, warm, with a laid-back atmosphere that was a far cry from the sleek, polished environments where they usually spent time together. Tanya liked it instantly. It felt real, in a way she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. As soon as she arrived, she saw Derek sitting at a corner table, the same soft smile he always gave her when she walked into a room. He stood up to greet her, and for the first time since their marriage, Tanya felt a flutter of something in her chest that wasn't anxiety. It was anticipation. He pulled out her chair for her, and she sat down, trying to ignore the warmth spreading through her. "I'm glad you came," Derek said, his voice low and sincere. "I've missed this." Tanya couldn't help but smile, her nerves starting to ease. "Yeah, me too." They ordered their food, and for a while, it was just like any other dinner between friends. They talked about their work, the things they were passionate about, and the little details that made their days unique. But then, as the conversation shifted to more personal topics, Derek grew quieter. His eyes softened, and Tanya felt her heart race slightly as he reached across the table, his hand resting gently on hers. "I don't want to push you, Tanya," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I need you to know that I'm in this. For real. Not just for the deal. Not just because we're married on paper. I'm here because I care about you, and I'm willing to wait for you, no matter how long it takes. I'll be patient, but I need to know if you feel the same way." Tanya's heart pounded in her chest. She felt a lump form in her throat, and she couldn't speak at first. All her carefully constructed walls, the ones she'd built to keep herself safe, were starting to crumble. She had been avoiding the truth for so long, telling herself that she didn't need anyone, that love wasn't for her. But sitting here, in this quiet, intimate moment with Derek, she realized just how much he had already become a part of her life. She couldn't deny the way she felt. "I don't know what I feel," Tanya said finally, her voice trembling. "I've spent so long convincing myself that I didn't need anyone, that love wasn't something I could trust. But you make me feel like I don't have to be afraid anymore." Derek's eyes lit up with something that looked like hope, and Tanya saw the relief in his face. He didn't need her to have all the answers. He just needed her to acknowledge that she wasn't running anymore. "You don't have to be afraid, Tanya," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I'm not going anywhere." The words hit her like a wave, washing over her in a way she wasn't prepared for. She had spent so long trying to protect herself, building up walls to keep herself from getting hurt. And now Derek was standing before her, offering something so much deeper than she had ever expected. Something real, something honest. Her heart, which had always been guarded, began to soften. She realized that maybe she didn't have to keep running from love. Maybe it wasn't as scary as she had always believed. "I'm not ready to make any promises," Tanya said quietly. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to let myself care." Derek's smile was gentle, and for a moment, Tanya saw something in his eyes, a quiet understanding, a sense of patience that made her feel like she had made the right choice. They didn't need to rush anything. There was no deadline, just two people trying to navigate their feelings in a way that felt real, that felt right. They spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and enjoying each other's company, but there was an unspoken understanding between them now, a shift in their relationship from something purely transactional to something more. As they parted ways later that night, Derek pulled her into a brief but warm hug. His arms around her felt comforting, like a promise, and Tanya realized that she wasn't afraid anymore. Whatever happened next, she was ready to face it. Later that night, Tanya lay in bed, her thoughts a jumble of emotion. She had let herself take a step towards something she never thought possible, a real connection, not just with Derek, but with herself. She had spent so long avoiding love, but now she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. She wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't facing it alone. The days after that dinner felt like a shift in the air. Tanya wasn't sure if it was the subtle change in her relationship with Derek or the feeling of finally letting down her guard. But something had changed. It was as though the weight of her fear had lightened just a little. She could almost breathe easier, even though she still carried the uncertainty of what might come next. Tanya threw herself back into work, but the usual distractions didn't seem as effective. Her mind wandered during meetings, thoughts drifting to Derek. She found herself noticing things she hadn't before, the little ways he cared, the quiet gestures that spoke louder than words. There were moments when she would catch herself thinking about the future, about the possibility of a future with Derek, and that thought terrified her and thrilled her all at once. She'd been so closed off for so long, so convinced that opening her heart to someone again was a mistake. But now she wasn't so sure. Derek was patient. He never pushed her, never demanded anything from her. He gave her the space she needed while still showing up in small ways, checking in with her about her day, offering encouragement when she felt stressed, and always making sure she knew he was there for her. The pressure that Tanya had felt in their marriage, the idea that it was all just a business deal, slowly started to fade away. She had to admit, this wasn't just a business arrangement anymore. There was something real here, and it was growing between them, whether she was ready for it or not. One evening, about a week after their dinner, Derek invited her over to his apartment. He had mentioned a new project he was working on, one that he thought she might be interested in helping with. Tanya had agreed, though she had no idea what to expect. She'd never seen the full scope of Derek's work, just glimpses of his career. But she was curious. They had spent more time together recently, but each encounter still felt like it was slowly peeling away layers of the both of them, revealing things that had been hidden for too long. When she arrived at Derek's apartment, she was greeted by the familiar warmth of his presence. He stood by the door, smiling that warm, easy smile that always made her feel a little bit safer. "Hey," Tanya greeted, her voice a little less guarded than before. "Hey," Derek replied, stepping aside to let her in. "Come in. I was just finishing up some details. I wanted to show you something." As they walked into the living room, Tanya saw a large presentation board set up on a nearby easel, filled with charts, graphs, and what appeared to be a business proposal. It was a project he'd been working on for months, a new venture that would expand his family's company into a new market. It wasn't just about profits for him. This project meant something more. He explained his vision for it, how it could help a lot of people while also ensuring the future of his family's legacy. Tanya listened intently as Derek spoke, her mind whirring as she took in the information. She had always admired his intellect and drive, but now she saw it in a new light. There was something about his passion that drew her in, made her realize how deeply he cared about not just his business but the people in it. She found herself wanting to be a part of that, wanting to help him build this dream. "You're serious about this?" Tanya said softly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Derek paused, looking at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. "I am," he said. "But it's not just about the company. I need your help, Tanya. Not just as a business partner, though that would be great, but as someone I trust, someone I believe in. I've never asked anyone for help like this before, but you're different." The sincerity in his voice hit her like a wave. She hadn't expected that kind of vulnerability from him. Derek was usually so composed, so controlled. But in this moment, she saw a side of him that she hadn't fully noticed before. A side that was uncertain, that needed her in a way she wasn't sure she was prepared to handle. Tanya took a step forward, her heart beating a little faster. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady, but inside she was fighting the urge to step back. Derek smiled, the tension in the room easing. "I need someone to help me manage the creative side of this project. Someone who can see the big picture, who understands people, who's not afraid to take risks. Someone like you." For the first time in a long time, Tanya felt a sense of purpose flood through her. Derek was offering her more than just a business opportunity. He was giving her the chance to be part of something bigger, something that could make a difference, something that could reshape the way she viewed her own potential. She smiled back, feeling a spark of excitement. "Okay," she said. "I'm in." The conversation shifted to logistics after that, and they worked late into the evening, brainstorming ideas, discussing potential pitfalls, and laying the groundwork for a partnership that could change both of their lives. As the night went on, Tanya found herself feeling more and more connected to Derek, not just as a business partner, but as someone who truly understood her, who valued her in a way she hadn't allowed anyone to before. As the night drew to a close, they stood together by the window, looking out over the city. Derek had turned toward her, his expression softer than usual. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for believing in me, for giving this a chance." Tanya felt her heart swell. "You don't have to thank me. I'm the one who's grateful." They stood there in silence for a moment, just enjoying the peacefulness of the evening. Tanya realized that, for the first time in a long while, she was beginning to feel like she belonged somewhere, like she had a place in Derek's world, and he had a place in hers. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Derek asked, his voice quiet but sincere. Tanya nodded, her heart steady. "I think I am." Later that night, as she drove home, Tanya couldn't shake the feeling that something inside her had shifted. She wasn't sure what the future held, or where this path with Derek would lead, but for the first time, she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was ready for it, ready to let herself care, ready to take a chance on something real. The following week felt like a slow unraveling of the walls Tanya had spent so many years building around her heart. The project with Derek had brought them closer, and the more time they spent working together, the more her initial reservations seemed to fade. She found herself looking forward to their meetings, not just because of the project itself, but because of the moments they shared, the quiet exchanges that carried more meaning than she cared to admit. Derek's patience was both a comfort and a challenge, and Tanya couldn't help but feel drawn to him in ways she hadn't anticipated. She had always told herself that she didn't need anyone, that love wasn't something that could be counted on. But now, every time she saw Derek, every time they spent time together, she felt a stirring deep within her. It wasn't just about the project anymore, it was about them. Derek had slowly become a part of her life in ways she couldn't easily ignore. And though she resisted it, though she told herself that this was just business, her heart whispered that it was more than that. One Thursday evening, as they were wrapping up a long day of work at the office, Derek looked at her with that familiar, thoughtful expression. "Tanya, we've made a lot of progress with this project," he said, pushing a stack of papers aside, "but I think we need to talk about something else." Tanya raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Derek shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "I'm not talking about the project. I'm talking about us. About what we're doing here. I don't want to make things more complicated for you, but I can't keep pretending like this isn't something real. I care about you, Tanya. I don't just want us to be business partners anymore. I want more than that. I want to know if you feel the same way." The words hit Tanya like a sudden storm. She had known this moment was coming, had known that eventually Derek would have to confront the reality of their situation. But she wasn't ready. She wasn't prepared for him to be so direct, so open about his feelings. The truth was, she had been avoiding it for weeks, pushing away her own feelings in an attempt to keep things simple. But now, as Derek's words settled into the space between them, she realized that she couldn't keep pretending. "I don't know what to say," Tanya admitted, her voice quiet, almost lost. She stood up from the desk, moving toward the window. "I never expected this, Derek. I never expected to feel anything like this for you." Derek stood as well, taking a step closer to her. "I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now. I just need to know if you're willing to try, if you're willing to take a chance on something real." Tanya closed her eyes, her mind racing. The last thing she had wanted was to complicate things further. But she couldn't deny the truth any longer. Derek wasn't just a man she had made a business deal with. He was someone she admired, someone she was beginning to care about in a way she had never thought possible. "I'm scared, Derek," Tanya confessed, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm scared that if I let myself care about you, I'll get hurt. I'm scared of opening myself up again." Derek's expression softened, and he reached out, gently touching her arm. "I'm not asking you to rush, Tanya. I'm not asking for anything more than what you're willing to give. I just want to be honest with you about how I feel, and I want you to be honest with me." Tanya swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. She had spent so long convincing herself that love was something she didn't need, that it was safer to stay detached. But now, standing here with Derek, she realized how much she had been denying. "Okay," she said finally, her voice steady but filled with vulnerability. "Okay, I'm willing to try, but I'm not promising anything, Derek. I need time. I need to figure this out, to figure out if I can really let myself love again." Derek smiled softly, relief flooding his face. "You don't have to promise anything, Tanya. I'll wait. I'll be here, no matter what." The tension that had been building between them seemed to dissipate, replaced by something gentler, something that held the potential for real connection. Tanya felt her heart ease, just slightly, as she looked at Derek. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, love wasn't something she had to be afraid of. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. Tanya threw herself into the project with Derek, their partnership growing stronger by the day. But it wasn't just the work that kept her heart engaged. It was the moments they shared. Laughter during late-night meetings, long walks after dinner, and the quiet, meaningful conversations that seemed to reveal more of themselves to each other with every passing day. Tanya found herself waking up each morning with a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. She was no longer living in fear of the unknown, of what might happen if she opened herself up. Derek was showing her that love wasn't something to be afraid of, that it wasn't about perfection or guarantees. It was about the willingness to take a chance, to be vulnerable, to trust that someone would be there, no matter what. One evening, after a particularly successful meeting with potential investors for the project, Derek suggested they take a break and go for a walk. The weather was crisp and clear, the kind of evening where everything felt right. As they walked through the park near his apartment, the lights from the street lamps flickered softly in the distance, casting a gentle glow on the path before them. They walked in comfortable silence for a while before Derek spoke again, his voice low and filled with warmth. "You know," he said, glancing over at Tanya, "I used to think that success was all about business, about building something, creating something that would last. But now I realize that it's more about the people you build with. It's about the connections you make along the way." Tanya turned to look at him, her heart swelling with emotion. "And what about us, Derek?" she asked quietly. "What do we build together?" Derek stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious but full of hope. "I don't know what the future holds, Tanya, but I know that I want to build it with you, one step at a time." In that moment, Tanya realized that she had been wrong all along. Love wasn't something to be feared. It was something to embrace. With Derek, she was beginning to see that she didn't have to face the world alone. They could build something together, something real, something that was worth the risk. She smiled softly, her heart finally at peace. "I'm ready," she said, her voice filled with certainty. Derek smiled back, taking her hand in his. "So am I." The days following Derek's confession were both exhilarating and overwhelming. Tanya had never imagined that she would find herself on this path, this unpredictable, uncertain road that seemed to twist and turn with each new revelation. But as time passed, she felt the pull toward Derek grow stronger, like gravity, like something she couldn't escape even if she tried. She had been so afraid of feeling vulnerable, so terrified of opening her heart to someone again. But Derek was different. With each passing day, she began to realize just how deeply her feelings for him had grown. The small gestures, the kindness he showed without expecting anything in return, the quiet moments they shared. These things added up, layer by layer, and Tanya could no longer ignore the truth. She cared about him in a way that went beyond friendship, beyond business. It was something deeper, something more meaningful. Yet, despite the growing connection between them, Tanya couldn't shake the lingering doubts in the back of her mind. She had always believed that love was complicated, messy, and ultimately fleeting. She had seen it in her parents' strained marriage, in her failed relationship with Jamal. Love had never been something she could trust, and she had convinced herself that living without it was easier, safer. But Derek was showing her a different kind of love, a love that was patient, kind, and steady. And still she was terrified. Tanya had always been a woman who believed in taking control, in managing her own fate. But in this, in the growing connection she felt with Derek, she realized she had to let go of that control, even if it meant facing the unknown. She wasn't ready to throw herself completely into a relationship just yet, but she couldn't keep pretending that she wasn't being pulled toward him. It was a Saturday afternoon when the next major shift in their relationship came. Tanya had spent the day working on some proposals for the project they were collaborating on. She had promised Derek she would meet him later to go over some of the final details, but the work had consumed her attention. As she glanced at the clock, she realized that it was well past the time they had agreed on. Tanya stood up from her desk, grabbing her coat and quickly texting Derek. "Sorry, running a bit late. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She wasn't sure what to expect when she arrived at his apartment. Their last few meetings had been light-hearted, but she knew there was still the lingering question between them. What was this? What was between them exactly? They had avoided discussing their feelings too much, not wanting to complicate things, but the more time she spent with him, the more difficult it became to ignore. When Tanya arrived at Derek's apartment, she was greeted by the familiar warmth of the space, the soft lighting, the slight scent of coffee in the air, and the quiet hum of a calm evening. Derek was sitting at his kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him, a cup of coffee resting by his side. "Hey," he said, looking up as she entered, a smile crossing his face. "I didn't expect you to be here so soon. Thought you'd be caught up with work a little longer. Tanya smiled, walking toward him. I could say the same about you, but I guess we're both workaholics. Derek chuckled, closing his laptop. True, but I'm glad you're here. I've been thinking about you. The words startled her, and for a moment she felt her heart race. You have? She asked, surprised by the directness of his statement. Yeah, Derek said, standing up and walking over to her. I've been thinking a lot about what you said before, about not being ready. I know you need time, and I'm not trying to rush you, but I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'm here. I'll be here. Tanya felt a flutter of something inside her, something she had been trying to ignore for so long. Derek wasn't pressuring her. He wasn't rushing her into a decision, but the way he looked at her, the sincerity in his voice, made her realize just how much he was willing to give. I'm scared, Derek, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked down at her hands, trying to steady herself. I'm scared that if I open up, I'll get hurt again. I don't know if I can trust this. Derek's expression softened, and he reached out, gently cupping her face with his hand. I'm not asking you to trust me all at once, Tanya. I'm just asking for a chance to show you that I'm not going anywhere. I care about you, more than you know, and I want to take this at your pace. No pressure. Tanya closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his touch, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the depth of her own emotions. She wasn't sure if she was ready to fully dive into a relationship with Derek, but she couldn't ignore how much he meant to her. She had spent so long trying to protect herself, but Derek wasn't like anyone else she had known. He wasn't asking her to be perfect. He was just asking for her to be real, to be honest with herself. I'm not ready to make any big decisions, she said quietly, her voice shaky. But I don't want to keep running from this either. Derek smiled gently, his thumb brushing across her cheek. That's all I can ask for, Tanya. No rush. No pressure. Tanya felt a weight lift off her shoulders, as if a small piece of her that had been closed off for so long was finally opening up again. She wasn't ready for everything, but she was ready for this moment, ready to take a step forward, even if it was small. As the evening went on, they sat together, talking about the project, about their future, and about the things they both wanted. Derek didn't push her, didn't try to convince her to feel anything she wasn't ready to feel. He just listened, letting her take the lead, and in that space, Tanya felt safe in a way she hadn't in years. As they parted ways later that evening, Derek leaned in to give her a hug, his embrace warm and reassuring. Tanya's heart raced, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from a quiet, growing sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to believe in something she had once given up on. As she walked back to her car, the cool night air filled her lungs, and for the first time in a long while, Tanya felt a sense of peace. She wasn't sure what the future held, or if Derek's love would be enough to overcome the barriers she had built. But one thing was certain. She wasn't running anymore. She was ready to face the future with an open heart. The following weeks were a mix of progress and uncertainty for Tanya. She and Derek continued to work closely on the business project, their partnership growing stronger with every meeting, every idea they brainstormed. Their dynamic had shifted from professional colleagues to something more, though neither of them openly acknowledged it, at least not yet. Tanya felt herself growing attached to him, but the fear that had always held her back still lingered. It wasn't easy to break old habits, to let down walls that had been built up over years of disappointment. Despite the growing connection between them, Tanya knew that she had to move carefully. Derek had been patient with her, understanding her need for time, but she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep pushing him away. Every time they talked, every time their hands brushed or their eyes met, the pull between them grew stronger. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what it all meant, but she knew that she could no longer deny the feelings that had begun to surface. It was a Saturday evening when things finally came to a head. Tanya had spent the day running errands and catching up on some work, trying to distract herself from the knot of emotions that had been building up inside her. Derek had invited her to dinner that night, suggesting they take a break from the project for a while and just enjoy each other's company. Tanya had agreed, though she was nervous. She knew that this dinner could be the turning point, the moment when she would have to confront everything she had been avoiding. When she arrived at Derek's apartment, the door was slightly ajar, and a soft light spilled out into the hallway. She knocked lightly before entering, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the quiet space. Derek was already in the living room, sitting on the couch with a relaxed smile on his face. "Hey," he greeted, standing up and walking over to greet her. "I was just getting everything ready." "Thanks for inviting me over," Tanya said, her voice quiet but warm. "I've been looking forward to this." Derek smiled, his eyes gleaming with that same genuine warmth that had always made her feel at ease. "Me too. I thought we could have a quiet evening, no business talk, just dinner and some downtime." Tanya nodded, appreciating the gesture. They'd spent so much time immersed in the project, and she realized how much she had missed just being with him without the weight of their responsibilities looming over them. The evening unfolded like any other. Easy conversation, laughter, and the comfortable silence that only came with people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. But as the night wore on, the underlying tension between them began to build. Tanya could feel it, the unspoken question that hung in the air. "What are we doing here?" She wasn't sure if she was ready to answer it, but she couldn't ignore it any longer. After dinner, they moved to the couch, both leaning back into the soft cushions. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the city outside. Derek shifted slightly, glancing at Tanya as if he was debating whether to say something. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "Tanya," he began, his words slow and deliberate. "I've been thinking about us, about what we've been doing. I know you've been taking things slow and I respect that, but I need to ask you something." Tanya's heart beat faster, her chest tightening. She had known this moment was coming, the moment when they would have to address what had been growing between them. She turned to face him, her expression uncertain. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Derek reached over, gently taking her hand in his. The simple touch sent a surge of warmth through her, and for the first time in weeks, she felt her heart open to him. Just a little. "I can't keep pretending that this is just business anymore," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I care about you, Tanya. I care about you more than I thought I could. I want us to be something real. I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now, but I need to know if you feel the same way." Tanya's breath caught in her throat. The words he spoke echoed the very thing she had been trying to avoid. What if I open myself up to you and get hurt? What if I let myself fall, only to be disappointed again? But in that moment, as she looked into Derek's eyes, she realized that the only way forward was to face her fears. She couldn't keep running from him, from herself. She had spent so long guarding her heart, telling herself that she didn't need anyone, but now, sitting here with Derek, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. Tanya looked down at their intertwined hands, her thoughts racing. She had to be honest with herself. Derek wasn't just a business partner, he was someone she cared about, someone who had shown her what it meant to love and be loved without conditions. He hadn't pushed her. He had been patient, understanding, and kind. And now, When it came down to it, she couldn't deny that she had begun to care for him too. "I do care about you, Derek," she said quietly, her voice trembling with the weight of her own admission. "I've been scared. Scared of what this could mean. Scared of opening myself up to something I've always tried to avoid. But I can't keep pretending that I don't feel something for you." Derek's face softened, and a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He gently lifted her chin, making her look up at him. "You don't have to be scared, Tanya. I'm not going anywhere." Tanya felt her heart swell with a mixture of relief and vulnerability. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't holding back. She wasn't afraid of what might happen. She was ready to take a leap of faith. "I'm willing to try," she said softly, her voice steady now, with conviction. "I'm willing to take this one step at a time. With you." Derek's smile widened, and for a moment the world seemed to fade away. The uncertainty, the fear, it all seemed distant now. In that quiet, intimate moment, Tanya realized that love didn't have to be perfect. It didn't have to be planned or controlled. It just had to be real. "I promise I'll be patient," Derek said, his voice filled with sincerity. "And I promise I'll always be here, no matter what." Tanya nodded, feeling a rush of warmth in her chest. She had taken the first step toward something real, something that had the potential to change everything. As they sat together, hand in hand, the world outside their apartment seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them now, a new beginning unfolding before them. And for the first time in years, Tanya allowed herself to believe in the possibility of love. Real love. The kind that wasn't about expectations or rules, but about trust, patience, and vulnerability. She wasn't sure where this journey would take them, but for the first time, she was ready to find out. Tanya's life had changed in ways she wasn't sure how to process. The woman who once prided herself on keeping things simple, on maintaining control, was now in the midst of something far more complicated. But as the days passed, she found that maybe complicated wasn't so bad. Maybe it was just another word for growth, for change, for the chance to rewrite a story that had been far too predictable. It had been a week since she had admitted her feelings to Derek, since she had allowed herself to take that first step toward vulnerability. She hadn't expected it to feel like a weight lifting off her chest, but it did. The fear that had held her back for so long was still there, lingering at the edges of her thoughts, but it no longer held the power it once did. Every time Derek reached out to her, every time he looked at her with that same steady gaze, the one that made her feel like she wasn't alone, she felt more and more certain that this was the path she needed to walk. But while her heart was opening, her mind still struggled to keep up. She couldn't help but remember the walls she'd spent years building, her past, the disappointments, the broken relationships that had made her question everything she thought she knew about love. It all still lingered in her thoughts. She couldn't just forget about the past. But maybe, just maybe, she could make peace with it. The next few days were filled with a mixture of work and quiet moments with Derek, each one bringing them closer. They continued to collaborate on the project that had brought them together, and Tanya was amazed by how easily their ideas seemed to flow. They made a great team. She had always known that, but now she saw it with clarity. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about something deeper, something real that was unfolding between them. One afternoon, as they sat in a cafe working through details of their latest proposal, Tanya felt her phone buzz in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting a work-related message, but instead, it was a text from her mother. "I think it's time we talked. Can you come by tomorrow?" Tanya's stomach clenched. Her mother. The one person in her life who had always insisted that Love was something to be fought for, yet had never truly shown her what that looked like. Tanya had always struggled with their relationship, with the way her mother's expectations seemed to hang over her every decision. Tanya had spent so long avoiding the emotional baggage her mother carried, but now, with everything that had changed in her life, she knew it was time to face the past. "Everything okay?" Derek asked, looking up from his laptop, sensing her unease. Tanya hesitated, staring at the message for a moment longer before locking her phone and slipping it back into her bag. "I think so," she said, her voice betraying the uncertainty she felt. "I'm going to see my mum tomorrow. We need to talk." Derek's eyes softened. "You don't have to explain anything to me, but I'm here if you need me." She nodded, appreciating his support more than she could express. "I know. I've just been avoiding this for too long. It's time I face it." The next day, Tanya arrived at her mother's house with a heavy heart. Her childhood home, still filled with familiar smells and old furniture, felt different now. It was as though she was stepping back into a world she'd left behind, a world that had never felt quite like it belonged to her. Her mother was waiting in the living room, her figure silhouetted against the window, her back turned. When she heard Tanya's footsteps, she turned around, her face unreadable. "Tanya," her mother said, her voice softer than usual. "I'm glad you came." Tanya stood by the door, unsure of how to approach the conversation. "You wanted to talk?" she asked, her voice quiet. Her mother nodded, gesturing for Tanya to sit down. "I've been thinking a lot about you lately, about everything. I know I haven't always been the best at showing it, but I want you to know that I've always wanted the best for you." Tanya took a deep breath, her emotions threatening to rise. She had heard these words before, but they had never felt genuine. Her mother's version of love had always been wrapped in expectations, in pressure, in the belief that success came at the cost of everything else. "Mom, I don't want your expectations anymore," Tanya said, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't want to live the life you think I should live. I've spent too long trying to meet your standards and pretending that I'm okay. But I'm not. I'm tired of trying to make you happy at the cost of my own happiness." Her mother's face softened, and for a moment, Tanya saw something vulnerable in her eyes. "I didn't realize that's how you felt," she said quietly. "I thought I was doing what was best for you, pushing you to be better, to not settle for less. I wanted you to be strong, independent, successful." Tanya interrupted her gently, shaking her head. "I don't want to be the person you think I should be, Mom. I want to be me, and I'm finally learning how to do that. I'm learning how to let myself love." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Tanya wasn't sure if her mother would respond. But then, her mother spoke, her voice breaking slightly. "I just want you to be happy, Tanya. I want you to have the life you deserve." Tanya blinked back the tears that threatened to fall. For the first time, she felt like her mother was seeing her, really seeing her. She wasn't just the daughter she had tried to mold into something else. She was her own person, and for the first time, she felt that her mother was acknowledging that. "I'm learning, Mom," Tanya said, her voice steady. "I'm learning how to be happy, on my own terms." Her mother reached out and took her hand, something Tanya hadn't expected. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. "I may not always understand, but I'll support you, Tanya. I'll support you." Tanya nodded, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. She wasn't sure what the future held with her mother, but in that moment, she realized that maybe the first step toward healing their relationship was learning to let go of the past. That evening, as Tanya sat with Derek in the cozy living room of his apartment, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Her conversation with her mother had been difficult, but necessary. She wasn't sure where their relationship would go from here, but she knew that the road to healing had to start somewhere. Derek, ever patient, was there when she needed him. He didn't push her for details. He didn't ask for anything more than what she was willing to share. He just sat with her, offering his presence as a reminder that she wasn't alone. "Everything okay?" Derek asked gently, his eyes searching hers. Tanya smiled softly, her heart lighter than it had been in days. "Yeah, I think I'm finally starting to let go of some things. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm getting there." Derek reached out, taking her hand in his. "You don't have to do it alone, Tanya. You've got me." Tanya looked into his eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in the future they were building together. She wasn't sure where the road would lead, but she was ready to walk it, hand in hand, with Derek by her side. Tanya woke up the next morning feeling lighter than she had in years. The weight of her conversation with her mother still lingered in the back of her mind, but it no longer felt like a burden. There had been a shift, a small but significant change in her. For the first time, she felt like she was no longer running from the things that scared her. She had confronted the past, spoken her truth, and now there was a quiet sense of peace within her that hadn't been there before. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of her apartment, casting warm, golden light across the room. Tanya stretched, reaching for the phone on her nightstand. A message from Derek awaited her. It was simple, just a few words, but it made her smile. "Good morning. I hope today is as great as you are." Tanya's heart warmed at the message. She had become so used to his steady presence in her life, so accustomed to the way he made her feel seen and heard, that it was hard to remember a time when she hadn't had him there. He had never pressured her, never demanded anything. He had simply been there, patient and supportive, letting her figure things out on her own terms. She hadn't realized how much she needed that kind of space, that kind of love, until he had given it to her. It wasn't the kind of love that came with expectations or rushed decisions. It was the kind of love that allowed her to grow, to heal, and to trust in herself again. As she went about her morning routine, Tanya reflected on how far she had come. Only a few months ago, she had been living a life of controlled distance, hiding from emotions and relationships. Now, with Derek, she was allowing herself to be vulnerable, allowing herself to take risks. And with each passing day, she felt stronger, more confident, more like the woman she had always wanted to be. Her phone buzzed again, this time a reminder for their next business meeting. They had a presentation scheduled with a potential investor for the new project, one that could significantly expand Derek's family business. It was a big step forward, and Tanya felt a mix of excitement and nerves. This was their chance to prove not only to others, but to themselves that their partnership could achieve great things. The meeting went smoothly, as Derek and Tanya presented their proposal with confidence. The potential investor seemed impressed with their vision, asking thoughtful questions and showing genuine interest. Tanya could feel the momentum building between them. This project was becoming more than just a business deal. It was a representation of everything they had worked for, everything they had built together. As the meeting concluded, they exchanged smiles and handshakes, and Tanya felt a sense of pride swell in her chest. Later that evening, Derek texted her again. "I couldn't have done this without you, Tanya. You make everything better." Tanya's fingers hovered over her phone as she thought about how to respond. She hadn't expected this partnership with Derek to become so personal, so meaningful. She had come into it thinking it was just a business deal, a way to help him with the inheritance clause. But now it was so much more than that. "I couldn't have done it without you, either, Derek. We make a great team." She smiled to herself, sending the message before setting the phone down. They made a great team. It wasn't just the project they were building, it was their relationship too. Each moment, each conversation, each little step forward felt like a promise to one another. It wasn't about rushing or forcing anything. It was about trusting the journey, letting things unfold in their own time. A few days later, Tanya and Derek found themselves in yet another meeting, this time with Derek's family. His father, the patriarch of the family business, had requested their presence to discuss the future of the company. Derek had mentioned that this was a significant moment for him. The family had always been skeptical about his professional choices, especially when it came to working alongside Tanya, but now they were finally coming together to decide the next steps. Tanya could sense the tension in the air as they entered the family office. A grand, oak-paneled room with large windows overlooking the city skyline. Derek's father, a stern-looking man in his early 70s, stood at the head of the table. He wasn't unfriendly, but there was an air of authority around him that made Tanya feel small, like a child in the presence of a strict parent. Derek's siblings too were present, his younger brother, who worked in finance, and his sister, who had recently taken an interest in the company's operations. They all greeted Derek and Tanya with polite smiles, but Tanya could feel the undercurrent of skepticism, the unspoken questions about her role in the company. She knew that her involvement in the project was still something of a concern for them. As the meeting began, Derek spoke confidently about the project's potential, presenting the investors' feedback and outlining their plans for the future. Tanya spoke when needed, offering her insights into the creative aspects of the project. But through it all, she couldn't shake the feeling that the family was still unsure about her place in their world. Finally, Derek's father spoke, his voice steady but firm. "I'm impressed with the work you've done so far, Derek. And Tanya," he said, nodding toward her. "It seems you've contributed more than just your business acumen. I hope you understand that the success of this project means more than just a financial gain. It's about the legacy of this family." Tanya nodded, meeting his gaze without flinching. She understood. She had always understood that it wasn't just about the money. It was about creating something that would stand the test of time, a legacy that could continue to grow and evolve. "I understand," she said, her voice clear and steady. "This project is about more than just business. It's about creating something lasting, and I'm committed to seeing it through." There was a pause as Derek's father looked at her, weighing her words. Finally, he nodded. "I appreciate your commitment. I may not always understand your methods, Tanya, but it's clear that you and Derek are on the same page. And that's what matters." Derek smiled, his eyes meeting Tanya's with pride. "We are, and we'll make this work, together." The rest of the meeting went smoothly after that, with the family discussing the next steps and agreeing to support the project. As they left the meeting, Derek turned to Tanya, a grin spreading across his face. "Well, that went better than I expected." Tanya laughed, feeling the tension ease from her shoulders. "I think we're finally earning their trust." "We're getting there," Derek said, his voice full of warmth. "One step at a time." As they walked out of the building together, the city lights twinkling around them, Tanya felt a sense of contentment she hadn't experienced before. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready to trust, to take that next step, and to embrace the future with Derek by her side. The weeks that followed were a blur of progress and change. Derek and Tanya had settled into a rhythm, balancing their personal connection with the demands of the project they were building together. But despite the business success, it was the small moments, the quiet, unspoken exchanges, that made Tanya's heart feel full in a way she hadn't anticipated. One evening, as they sat together on the couch in Derek's apartment, the soft hum of the city outside the window, Tanya found herself leaning against him, her head resting on his shoulder. They had been working late, but now the world seemed to fall away, leaving just the two of them in this peaceful, intimate moment. Derek's arm was around her, his hand gently resting on hers. "I've never been good at waiting," Tanya said quietly, breaking the silence. "But with you it's different. I'm not afraid anymore." Derek turned his head, his eyes soft as they met hers. "Neither am I," he said, his voice warm. "We're in this together, and we'll figure it out, step by step." Tanya smiled, a sense of calm washing over her. She wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but she knew that as long as she had Derek by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid to trust. Trust him, trust herself, and trust the future. As the project with Derek moved forward, Tanya began to realize that everything in her life was shifting. She was no longer the woman who avoided emotional connections, who kept people at arm's length for fear of getting hurt. With Derek, she felt like she was part of something bigger than herself, something that wasn't just about business, but about building a future together. One evening, after another successful meeting with their investors, Derek suggested they take a break from work and go for a walk in the park near his apartment. It had become one of their little traditions, a way to unwind after a long day and reconnect. As they strolled down the path, the evening sky stretching with streaks of orange and pink, Derek reached for her hand. His touch was gentle, and for a moment, Tanya allowed herself to lean into him, feeling the warmth of his presence beside her. "I've been thinking," Derek said, his voice soft but serious, "about us, and about what comes next." Tanya turned to face him, her heart fluttering. "What do you mean?" "Everything has changed for me," he said, stopping in his tracks to face her fully. "Not just with the project, but with you. And I think it's time we stop pretending this is just business. I want this us to be real." Tanya felt a lump form in her throat. In that moment, everything she had been holding back, every fear, every doubt, began to dissolve. She wasn't ready for perfection, but she was ready to take this step. "I'm ready too," she said, her voice steady, but filled with emotion. And in that simple moment, with the world stretching out before them, Tanya knew they were both ready to leap into the future together. As the weeks passed, Tanya and Derek's relationship deepened in ways both expected and unexpected. The project they had embarked on together was thriving, gaining momentum with every successful pitch, every investor meeting that ended in enthusiastic support. The future they had once viewed as uncertain was now unfolding before them, step by step, and Tanya couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. But it wasn't just the success of the project that made Tanya feel more alive than she had in years. It was the connection she felt with Derek, the ease of being with him, the way he supported her without question, and the way he looked at her, as if she was the most important part of his world. There was a tenderness in his eyes that softened the edges of her past fears, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid to trust him completely. One evening, after another long day of work, they decided to take a quiet night for themselves. Derek had suggested they cook dinner together, something they hadn't done in a while, and Tanya agreed, enjoying the prospect of a relaxed evening. As they stood in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and laughing over shared jokes, the simplicity of the moment struck Tanya. She had never imagined that cooking dinner together, in the quiet of his apartment, could feel so right. "This is nice," Tanya said, her voice soft as she chopped a tomato. "I never realized how much I missed moments like this." Derek glanced up from his work, his smile warm. "I like this too," he said. "Sometimes the simple things mean more than we give them credit for." Later, as they sat down to eat, Tanya looked across the table at Derek, her heart full. She realized that, in so many ways, she had been building walls around herself for Years, afraid of being hurt, afraid of trusting anyone with her heart. But with Derek, the walls had slowly started to crumble, and the woman she had been, guarded, self-reliant, emotionally distant, was no longer who she was becoming. "Derek," Tanya said after a long pause, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm not sure where this journey is taking us, but I know I'm ready for whatever comes next. With you." Derek reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Me too, Tanya. I'm ready too. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of their quiet evening and the promise of the future, Tanya realized that love wasn't about perfection. It was about trust, about vulnerability, and about choosing each other day by day, step by step. She had spent so long afraid of love, afraid of being hurt again. But now, with Derek beside her, she knew that love was worth the risk. And as they finished their meal, hand in hand, Tanya felt a sense of peace wash over her. The future was no longer something to fear. It was something they would build together. The days ahead felt different, brighter somehow. Tanya and Derek had finally taken the leap, choosing each other, embracing the future without fear. With every step they took together, the foundation they were building grew stronger. The business project continued to thrive, but more importantly, their relationship had become a partnership in every sense of the word. One evening, as they stood side by side, looking out over the city from Derek's apartment, Tanya realized that she had found something she had long given up hope of ever finding: true connection, true love. With Derek, she wasn't afraid anymore. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.